I found a Bigfoot body that I caught on camera 9 miles into the Northern California mountains. We spent 2 days filming the discovery of the century, unaware of what was watching us the entire time. What my camera proves about why that Sasquatch body was laying out in the open is the most disturbing and terrifying thing you will ever see. My name is Ray, and I have run hounds in the Six Rivers country of Humboldt County for 26 years. That job makes you a certain kind of expert. I know what every animal in those mountains leaves behind. I know what a carcass looks like on day 1 and day 4 and day 10, and I keep 11 trail cameras on a bait line 9 miles back off the last logging spur. My partner Cliff had hunted that same country beside me for 19 seasons, and my 2 hounds, June and Bo, had ridden in behind us for most of it. We went in that Thursday to pull cards and rebait, the most ordinary work there is, and I came out alone with 4 hours of video, my helmet camera, 11 camera cards, and a Bigfoot body on every one of them. I have never released the last 30 seconds until now, so please stay with all of it, because the part that matters is not the part you think. We found it at 10 in the morning on the first day, and I want you to understand how little drama there was in it, because that is the part that should scare you. Camera 6 sits at the edge of a small, grassy clearing 40 minutes off the spur, a place I have walked past 400 times. Cliff came around the alders ahead of me and stopped, and he did not shout and he did not swear. He went quiet and put a hand back at me, the way you do when there is a bear on the trail. Then I came up beside him and looked out into that clearing, and lying on its side in the wet grass in full morning light was a Bigfoot, dead, close enough to touch, and I have the moment on my helmet camera where neither of us says a word for 11 seconds. The dogs would not go near it. That is the first thing that was wrong, and I ignored it, and I have thought about it every day since. I run 2 hounds. June is a redhead, 7 years old, the best nose I ever put on a mountain, and she has never quit on anything in her life. Bo was 11, deaf on his left side, gone gray all through the muzzle, and he had been on every hunt I made since I bought him out of a truck bed in Willow Creek as a pup. He rode in the cab with me instead of the box because the washboard hurt his hips, and if you have ever had a dog get old on you, then you know what he was to me. Both hounds would run a bear into a rock pile and go in after it. When I walked them to the edge of that clearing, both locked their legs and would not take another step, and June sat down in the trail and shook, and when I pulled her forward by the collar, she screamed like she had been cut. Any man who runs hounds knows what that means. My dogs did not think the Bigfoot in that clearing was dead. They knew better than I did on the first morning, and I walked June back down to the truck box and kept Bo on a lead because he would not settle, and I wanted him where I could see him. The first rock came out of the timber about an hour after we started on it. We had the tape out and both packs open in the grass, and something came down out of the alders on the uphill side and hit the ground 8 feet from where I was kneeling, hard enough to throw dirt on my hand. A river rock the size of a grapefruit, then a second cracked off a stump behind Cliff, and he came up with the rifle and glassed that tree line for 2 solid minutes, and there was nothing in it. That is flat ground on the uphill side, no cliff above that clearing, and rocks do not travel 80 yards out of standing timber sideways. Something threw them, and it did not throw them at us, which is what I should have understood then, because every animal that wants you gone makes itself known while it does. Whatever threw those rocks stayed in cover, put both close enough to move a man and not close enough to hurt one, and waited to see what we would do. What Bo did was go. He hit the end of that lead hard enough to part it and went straight up into the alders after whatever had thrown them, baying the way he had bayed his whole life, and I stood in that clearing and listened to my old dog's voice climb the hill and go away from me. Then it stopped. It did not trail off. It stopped in the middle of a note. I called him for 20 minutes. Then we wrote the rocks down as probable rockfall, told each other Bo would come in on his own the way hounds do, and went back to work on the body, and that was the answer Bigfoot had been waiting on. We found Bo at dusk, and we did not have to look for him. He was out in the clearing about 20 feet from the body, and he had not been there an hour earlier. His neck was broken. Nothing on him had been eaten, and there was not another mark on him anywhere, and he had been laid out, straightened on his side, with his legs put out neatly, and his head turned toward Bigfoot, the grass around him standing untouched, no drag mark from any direction. I carried an 11-year-old hound down to my truck in the dark, a dog that never once refused me anything, and I want to be honest about what I said out loud, because it is the same lie I told about everything else in those 2 days. I told Cliff a cougar had gotten him. Bigfoot had killed a dog it did not want to eat, carried him out into the open, and arranged him where I could not miss him, and it had just shown me as plainly as it knew what it does with a body when it wants a man to walk up close. I put a tape on that body, and I will give you the numbers, because they are the reason I could never talk myself out of it. 9 feet 1 inch from heel to crown, a foot 16.5 inches long, and 7 across the ball. Arms so long the hands lay past where a man's knees would be. Dark reddish-brown hair, coarse as broom bristle, worn thin and gray across the chest, and a face flat and wide, and awful in how much of a person was in it and how much was not. It lay on its right side with its knees drawn up and one arm folded under its head, and on that first morning I believed with all my heart that I was looking at a dead Bigfoot and that my life had just changed. What I never once asked in 2 days was the only question that mattered, which was what a Bigfoot that size had died of out in open grass with no mark on it anywhere. Everything about that body was wrong, and every wrong thing was a gift I refused to open. There were no flies on it, 9 feet of meat lying in the open in September, and not one blowfly landed and stayed, and the few that came drifted off like the air over it was bad. There was no smell at all, and Cliff said out loud that a deer that size would be announcing itself from 100 yards by now. Nothing had fed on it, no bird, no coyote, no beetle at the eyes or the mouth. It was not bloated, and when I put my hand on its forearm through a glove, it was not stiff. It moved. That arm had the loose, warm give of an animal that had gone down 20 minutes ago, in a clearing where the grass had already grown back around it, and every hour I spent filming Bigfoot was an hour I spent not adding those two facts together. So we did what any 2 men in our position would have done, and it is the thing I would give my life to undo. We stayed. We made that decision with my dead dog already wrapped in a tarp in the bed of my truck. There was no cell signal 9 miles back in that country, and we both knew that if we drove out to report it, we would come back to nothing, or to somebody else's find, or to a Forest Service line telling us to stand down. Cliff said the word, and I agreed inside of a second. Documentation. 2 days of building a case no man alive could argue with, and then we walked out of those mountains with the Bigfoot the world had argued about for 60 years. I have watched that conversation back more times than is healthy, and what I hear now is not 2 hunters getting excited. I hear 2 men telling Bigfoot exactly how long they meant to stay. We took samples off it too, and that is the part I will answer for when my time comes. I cut a bundle of hair off the outside of the left thigh with my skinning knife, low down where nobody would notice it was gone, and 2 things happened that I explained away inside of a second eat. The skin under that hair was warm. The sun is not warm on the top side, warm underneath in the shade of the leg, the way a living animal is warm, and I told myself a body that size holds heat a long while. Then the cut roots wept, and what came up was fresh red blood, thin and bright and moving, and I have taken hide off enough dead animals to know that dead blood does not look like that. Cliff asked me how long ago I thought this Bigfoot had died, and I heard myself tell him a couple of hours. I had a live Bigfoot bleeding under my knife, and I wrote it down in my notebook as a fresh carcass. The mystery that ate the whole trip started with me being good at my job. I have skinned and quartered more animals than I could count, and I could not find a wound on it. Not a bullet hole, not a broken bone, not a tooth mark, no bruise, nothing. Its knuckles were not split, so it had not fought anything. Its feet were clean, no thorn scars, no mud, and hold on to that, because a 9-foot animal that walks this country does not have clean feet. Cliff kept coming back to the same question all afternoon, asking me what in these mountains kills a Bigfoot. I did not have an answer. Nothing in Humboldt County kills something that size, and if it did, it would have eaten some of it, and that left 2 explanations. Either a Bigfoot had lain down in an open field and stopped for no reason at all, or it had not stopped. Then I pulled the card from camera 6, and that clip is the most important piece of footage I have, and I still could not read it right. Camera 6 is a motion trigger that had been sitting on that clearing for 19 days. It has the clearing empty at 7, empty at 9, empty at 11. At 4:17 in the morning, it has 1 photo of nothing but grass and a smear of something at the very edge of the frame. At 4:18, it has the Bigfoot lying in the middle of that clearing exactly the way we found it. 1 minute, no sequence of it staggering in, no trail, and I walked that whole clearing with a light, and there is no drag mark anywhere in the grass, no crush line, no path pressed down from any direction. Nothing carried that Bigfoot in, and nothing dragged it. It came in on its own 2 2 feet in the dark, it lay down on its side in the middle of the open, and it arranged itself. The first knock came that night, and Cliff heard it before I did. We had a camp on the bench above the clearing to keep the body in sight, and a little after full dark, there was a single hollow crack of wood on wood from the timber across the meadow. Then 20 minutes of nothing. Then a second from a different direction. No howls, no screams. 2 flat knocks, spaced out and patient, the way you tap on a window to see whether anybody is home. And Cliff said the thing that should have put us in the truck, that if that was a Bigfoot out in the trees, then the thing in the grass was not the only one in the drainage, and something out there knew we were dead and had not done anything about it. We told each other it was morning. That is what 2 grown men decided, sitting over the greatest find in history. The card I pulled the next morning had something on it I sat and looked at for a long time. Camera 6 had fired 4 times in the night, and in all 4 frames there is a live Bigfoot standing over the body, not crouched over it, not touching it, standing upright alongside it in the infrared, with its head turned away from the corpse entirely, looking uphill toward the bench where Cliff and I were asleep. In the 4th frame, both arms are hanging, and its face is angled directly at our camp. I told Cliff it was grieving, and you can hear me say that word on the clip. What I was actually looking at was a Bigfoot standing beside the bait to check on the 2 of us, and the reason it never once looked down at the body at its feet was that there was nothing down there worth looking at. The arms had moved. This is the detail people call me a liar over, so I will only tell you what is on the camera. On day 1, my helmet footage shows Bigfoot on its right side with the left arm folded under its head and the right arm out along the grass, palm down. On day 2, the same body has the right arm drawn in against its chest and the head turned maybe 15 degrees further toward the camp. I laid the 2 frames side by side, and the grass around it is undisturbed. I made myself say the word rigger out loud because rigger can move a limb, and I knew even as I said it that rigger had never once in 26 years turned an animal's head to look at where I was sleeping. Cliff would not talk about it. He started keeping the rifle across his knees instead of against a tree, and he asked me twice how much more footage we really needed of a Bigfoot that was not going anywhere. We should have driven out that morning. Instead, we went deeper, and that was my idea, and I own it. My logic was that a Bigfoot had come from somewhere, that there had to be a place up that drainage where it had lived and died, and that if I filmed that too, then nobody on earth could dismiss us. So we left the body under 2 cameras and went up on foot, out of the alders and into old-growth Douglas fir, where the canopy closes over and the light goes green. And from the moment we started climbing, the woods were silent. No jays, no squirrels, nothing. 26 years in that country, and I have never been in a live forest that quiet. And every step we took away from that Bigfoot was a step deeper into somewhere the animals had already agreed not to be. We found the second one a mile and a half up, and it was nothing like the first. It was wedged back under an undercut bank in a stand of fir, and it was old. Mummified is the word. The hair had gone a dull ash color and come away in patches. The skin over the ribs had dried and split like old harness leather, and one whole arm lay separate about 4 feet off. Nothing about Bigfoot was fresh, and nothing about it was staged. It had died in a hard place, tucked back out of the weather where nothing would ever find it. I filmed it for 6 minutes with my voice shaking on the audio, and the thought I had was honest and completely wrong, that we had found 2 in 2 days, and that meant they die out here like anything else. What I should have been thinking about was the difference between where this one had chosen to lie down and where the other one was. Then we found the 3rd and the 4th inside of 200 yards, and that is when it stopped being a discovery and became a place. The 3rd was almost all bone, a long, heavy skeleton half sunk in the moss with a jaw I could not have circled with both hands. The 4th was only a scatter, ribs and a shoulder blade and the top of a skull with the moss grown so thick over it that I put my boot through it before I saw it. 4 Bigfoot bodies in less than a quarter mile, everyone tucked into deep cover under banks and blowdown, every one of them old. I have that whole stretch on video, and it is the part nobody ever asks me about, which I will never understand, because it is the only part that proves anything. 4 of them, real ones, filmed in daylight from 3 feet away. This was a place where Bigfoot went to die, and we were standing in the middle of it filming, and it took me another 20 minutes to notice the thing that had been screaming at me since the first mile. They were all deep, and they were all hidden, and they got older the further in we went. Not one of them was in the open. Not one of them was anywhere a man walking a trail would ever see it. Every dead Bigfoot in that drainage had gone somewhere tight and dark and out of the weather to lie down, back under a bank or in a hollow, exactly the way any wild animal on earth dies, and every one of them had been there long enough for the moss to take it. And 9 miles back down the mountain, out at the very edge of all of it, 40 minutes off a logging spur, in an open grassy clearing that a houndsman walks past 400 times in his life. In front of one of my own cameras, there was a fresh one lying out in the sunshine in the middle of the grass with no wound on it and not one fly. Nothing dies where it will be found. I have spent 26 years learning that, crawling into rock piles and hollow logs after animals that went as far into the dark as they could get before they quit. Because every wild thing hides to die, and there are no exceptions. The 4 up that drainage had obeyed that law. The one in the clearing broke every part of it. It was in the open, in good light, on flat, easy ground a man can walk to in 40 minutes, laid out neat like something arranged for viewing. That body had not fallen in that clearing. It had been placed in it the way you place anything you want found. And I had spent 2 days measuring it and cutting samples off it and calling it the discovery of the century. I had never found Bigfoot at all. It had found me at 4:17 in the morning. 19 days into a camera line, it had watched me walk. I told Cliff we were leaving, and he was already moving. About a half mile above the clearing, we got our first look at a live one, and it was not what you would expect. It stood perfectly still in the timber uphill of us, dark and enormous against the fir trunks, maybe 70 yards off. And it did not roar or charge or make itself big. It watched us come down, tracked us past, and fell in above us. All of that is on my helmet camera. It did not chase. It walked the contour above us, keeping pace on the uphill side, always between us and the top of the drainage, and I recognized the pattern out of my own trade in about 4 seconds. That is what a houndsman does when he is putting an animal where he wants it, and a Bigfoot was doing it to the 2 of us, and it was pushing us downhill toward the clearing. There were more than one, and my own camera line proved it. I have since pulled every card off all 11 cameras, and across those 2 days, Bigfoot appears on 6 of them, not one animal moving through. 6 cameras across a mile and a half of that drainage, 4 triggering inside the same 3-minute window at 4 in the morning, and one of those frames has 2 of them in it at once. They had our camp ringed, they had the clearing ring, and while Cliff and I stood over that body making plans out loud, Bigfoot was walking a circle around us just outside the light, waiting for us to finish falling for the oldest trick there is. It took a cliff 200 yards above the clearing, and it came from below us, from the downhill side, which is the one direction neither of us was watching because the whole way down we had been staring at the one on the ridge. There was no warning sound at all. Cliff was 4 steps ahead of me on the trail, and then he was going sideways, and up, off his feet, and my helmet camera swings and catches all of it, because I turned toward the noise instead of away. A second Bigfoot had come up out of the ravine and had him around the chest and one arm, and it did not maul him, and it did not throw him. It squeezed. I heard his ribs go in a run, one after another, like a man walking down a pallet, and Cliff got out about half of my name, and then there was no air left in him to make the rest of it. It did not hurry any part of it. It stood square in the open, holding a 200-pound man off the ground, with his boots swinging clear of the ferns, its face turned toward me over the top of his head the whole time, and it adjusted its grip once, higher, and squeezed again, and the sound changed to something wet. 19 seasons I hunted beside that man. The last of him I ever saw was his hands going loose. Then Bigfoot lowered him into the ferns almost gently and set 1 foot across his back, and it stood over him and looked at me. And I understood that it had done all of it slowly and in plain sight on purpose, because it had never been about Cliff at all. It was about the man with the camera, and what it wanted the man with the camera to do next was run. I did not help him. I want that on the record because I have had to live in it. I ran, and Bigfoot let me, and I know now that it let me on purpose, the same way everything in those 2 days was on purpose. It had a live man in its hands, and it stood in the open, where I could see every inch of it, and made me watch. And then it left me an unbroken downhill run, and did not take 1 step after me. I made 200 yards before I understood what was wrong with that, and understanding it nearly put me on the ground. A thing that could cross a ravine and catch Cliff without a sound could have had me any second it chose. It did not want me caught up there in the timber. It wanted me to drive down the drainage, and there was exactly one thing waiting at the bottom of that drainage, and it was lying in the grass with its knees drawn up. And then Bigfoot used my own name. I was coming down through the alders with my lungs tearing, and I heard Cliff call for me from up the slope behind me. Ray, twice in his voice, clear as a bell, out of a man whose chest I had just heard come apart. It was not Cliff. Cliff was dead in the ferns 200 yards above me, and I had watched it happen. And I still turned my head, because 19 years of a man's voice saying your name gets underneath everything you know. That Bigfoot had spent 2 days listening to the pair of us talk over that body, and it had our names, and it used them to try to walk me back up the hill. That is when the last of it came together for me. Everything we had said out loud over those 2 days, our names, our plan, how long we meant to stay, and which way our truck was parked, we had said all of it standing over a Bigfoot we were certain could not hear us. I came out into the clearing because there was no other way to the spur, and I have to tell you what I did there, because it is the reason this footage exists, and it is the worst decision of my life. The body was still lying in the grass exactly where it had been for 2 days, and I stopped. 9 miles from the road with my partner dead behind me and something coming down the hill. And I stopped because I understood in that second that I was going to walk out of there with nothing. No cliff, no samples, no case, and that the only thing that would make any of it mean something was footage nobody could argue with. So I walked up to within about 12 feet of that Bigfoot body, and I put the camera on it, and I got the shot. And that footage is the clearest look at Bigfoot that anyone has ever recorded, and I say that knowing exactly how it sounds. There is no blur on it, and no distance, and no brush in the way. 9 feet of it filling the frame in flat gray morning light, close enough that you can count the individual hairs on the back of a hand the size of a dinner plate. Close enough to see the calluses on the sole of that 16-inch foot and the old white scar seams under the thin hair of the chest and the way the coarse hair whirls at the wrist. You can see the lines around the mouth. You can see one ear. Every argument anybody has ever had about whether this animal is real is finished by 11 seconds of that recording. And for those 11 seconds, I honestly believed I was the man who had settled it, standing over the body of the only Bigfoot ever found. Then on the footage, the chest moves. It is small. If you were watching it on a phone at a normal size, you would miss it, and I missed it standing right there, 12 feet away, with my own eyes. The chest of Bigfoot rises and falls, once, slowly and even, and then again, and the tempo of it is not the last shudder of anything dying. It is the resting breathing of an animal that has been lying comfortably in a field for 2 days, waiting for somebody to come close enough. And in the very next second of that recording, you can hear the reason I finally looked up from the viewfinder, which is my dog, June, screaming from inside the truck box better than a mile off down the spur. And any man who runs hounds will tell you a mile of still morning air is nothing at all, that you learn to hear your dogs from further out than that and know each one by name. It was the same sound she had made on the first morning when I dragged her toward that clearing, and my hounds had been right about that Bigfoot from the moment they laid eyes on it. The eyes opened while I was still standing there. That is on the recording too, and it is the last thing on it. There was no flutter and no roll and none of the confusion of a thing waking up out of anything. The lids came up smoothly, and both eyes were already looking straight into my lens, focused, close, clear, and they had been open before behind that thin skin the whole time. Then the arm that had lain under its head slid out into the grass, unhurried, the way a man moves an arm he has been resting on, and 9 feet of Bigfoot came up off the ground in one long motion. There was no stagger in it, no stiffness after 2 days lying on its side in wet grass, no shake, no gathering of itself, nothing that any animal on earth does after being down for 2 days, because it had not been down for 2 days in any way that cost it anything. It simply stopped pretending. It rose up over the top of my camera until the frame was nothing but the chest I had been filming, that same chest with the old white scar seams, close enough now that the lens could not hold all of it. Nothing had killed it. Nothing had ever killed it. It had never been dead for 1 second. Out of the 2 days I spent measuring it and filming it and touching its arm through a glove, and the last frame of that recording is the underside of its jaw as it stood, and then my hand dropping, and then the sky, and then the grass, and then nothing. I am here, and I do not fully know why. I remember the alders and the truck, and my hands not working on the keys. And I remember June screaming in the box the whole way down that spur, and the empty place beside her where Bo used to ride. Cliff is still up there. I gave 2 deputies 11 camera cards and 4 hours of video, and what came back 8 weeks later was that Cliff had most likely been killed by a bear, and that a man who runs hounds for a living ought to know better than to say the word Bigfoot to a deputy. So the footage sat on a drive in my shop a long time before I decided. Somebody had better see it. So here is the only thing I have worth giving you, and it cost me a friend and a dog to learn. Every one of us has been looking for a Bigfoot body for 60 years. We all know what we would do if we found one, and Bigfoot knows it better than we do, and And that is why the only one you will ever be allowed to find will be lying out in the open, in easy country, in good light, where you cannot possibly miss it, with no wound on it and no smell, and not one fly on it anywhere. The bodies out there are real. I filmed 4 of them, but every last one of the real ones is deep in the dark under a bank where no man will ever set eyes on it. And the one you find in the sunshine has its knees drawn up and its eyes closed, and it is counting how many of you there are and listening to every single word you say. If you are ever the man who finds a Bigfoot body, do not measure it and do not film it. And for God's sake, do not touch it. Watch its chest, because it is not dead, it has never been dead, and it has been waiting a very long time for somebody exactly like you to walk up close.